I think one of the things that we talk about often for you, Lachlan, is that as we think about agriculture as being an opportunity to generate credits, there are those also that will be looking to purchase credits, which is why we have a marketplace. As with any marketplace, there might be some volatility. So when we think about what the future outlook might be for the value of carbon credits, what factors might impact the market outlook for the value of particularly, I guess, an ACCU?
Sure. So, look, I think the best way to start is probably with the current market conditions. It isn't as financialized or as liquid a market, just given its size and how relatively new it is compared to more established, for instance, agricultural commodity markets. So that pricing visibility, even that, is probably at a lower threshold. So unlike something like the CME wheat futures that you can look up online, you know every second of the day exactly how much that futures contract is going to be worth, or even how much the spot contract today is. That isn't the case with the carbon market. There is some published data that participants in the call might be able to jump online and just take a look at. There's data that you can access if you pay for it as well. But what I'm trying to describe is it is not as liquid or an established market. So sort of opaqueness and general lack of liquidity, that's a big factor. But that's the current sort of market conditions. When we talk about overall impacts and what's shaping the future of the market, there have been a couple of really big regulatory or government changes over the past 8 months. It's been actually quite a dynamic time in the carbon market in Australia. So in the change of government in the middle of last year, there was a snap review of the ACCU market in Australia, commissioned by the new Labor government under Anthony Albanese and the responsible minister, Chris Bowen. What that report was designed to do was assess the market, assess its integrity, the different methods that are involved, and it was led by former Chief Scientist Ian Chubb. And that was actually handed down at the start of last year. There's quite a range of recommendations that are being undertaken and implemented by the regulator, including tightening up aspects such as measurement, regulatory governance requirements, all these sorts of things. So increased participation, increased investment, increased scrutiny on the market, which is most welcome, it is actually leading to gradual market improvement. So that's one significant change that's currently afoot. Another is the introduction of a revamped and re-strengthened safeguard mechanism. And I mentioned this prior in the webcast. So that's that requirement for the largest emitters in this country to purchase ACCUs, many of which are generated and supplied from the land sector in Australia and other sectors such as waste management as well. So a requirement for those emitters, if they emit over what is now actually much more stringent baselines and requirements for decarbonisation, if they breach those, then they have to buy ACCUs. So that's a big dynamic affecting the natural balance. And this is what I'm sort of driving to is in terms of market outlook, it's all about supply and demand, and those big dynamics drive every big market. It's just that those supply and demand dynamics are very unique here. So on the supply side of the Aussie carbon market, I touched on some different methodologies. There are new methods being developed all the time, and that is going to be a natural driver of how much supply of sequestered carbon can come into the market, how much can be verified by the regulator, ticked off and credited to producers. There's new methods being developed, such as, for instance, on our coastal areas across the country, blue carbon, so to speak, including agricultural managed land on the coast. There is a question mark with regards to supply on exactly what the uptake of carbon projects are going to be across the country. It's not a given that every agricultural operator is going to decide, yep, this is right for me and step in. Just as with any business enterprise, it's quite difficult to forecast that. So that's a big factor that is currently uncertain. The amount of inventory that is going to be used that's currently stored in the accounts. The way you store a carbon credit in Australia is the Australian National Registry of Emissions Units. So how much of the current inventory that's currently there is going to be used or intends to be used? How much will it be sold? So these are the sorts of questions that are driving the supply equation. On the demand side, unfortunately, it's just as complicated. So I already spoke about we've got the safeguard mechanism. how effective are the biggest emitters in this country going to be at decarbonising and meeting those goals that the government's thrust upon them? Because if they're very effective at doing that, there might be a relatively low demand for ACCUs. If they find it a real challenge, then there could be more of a demand for ACCUs, which will tip the scales a bit. There's a question mark over voluntary commitments. How much of the business community and industry in Australia, how much even individual consumers are going to be wanting to buy offsets in the coming years? We are seeing increased decarbonisation commitments every week. We probably all read them in the news. But how much of that is going to translate into buying offsets? There are varied opinions. So that's going to impact demand as well. There's even larger government regulations at play, like carbon border adjustment mechanisms and the like, that are going to have an impact here too. So when we talk about, for instance, what's going to be the future price of carbon, every different analyst has a different expectation. And what we probably try to refocus, at least our clients, on thinking about is just the supply and demand dynamics. And in the first instance, is it right for them to decide to get involved either as a potential producer of carbon certificates or as a potential buyer of them as well?